Welcome back to the Photo Banter podcast. I'm your host, Alex Gagne, and on today's podcast, I speak with photographer Todd Hido. Todd's work has been featured in the New York Times, Wired, Vanity Fair, as well as being in permanent collections of the Getty, the Whitney Museum, the Guggenheim Museum, and the Smithsonian, to name a few. In this interview, I speak to Todd about his approach to photography, his experience studying under legendary photographer Larry Sultan, and I also speak to Todd about how he first got his work seen and into galleries. Todd is a photographer whose work I've been following for a while now, so I was really excited to get a chance to speak with him about everything he's kind of accomplished over the course of his career. So I hope you enjoy it, and thanks so much for listening. All right. Well, Todd Hido, welcome to the podcast, man. Excited to have you on. A lot going on in the world the last 4 months. Yes. Crazy times. I guess to start off, man, like, how's the last 4 months been for you, man? Like,
it's been
kind of crazy.
Yeah. I'd say the exact same thing. It's been absolutely kind of crazy and weird. And also just like it's one of those things that gives you perspective. About how lucky we are. Some of us, or even a lot of us are very lucky, like in the world, but just to be able to just in the interconnectedness that we all have, like we're like an organism, and like if one part doesn't do well, the other part's not going to do well, and all this stuff happening in the politically and just there's just such upheaval. It's really kind of like I've never seen before. And so what I've been doing is I've just been like. I'm also like one of those people that I've seen too many zombie movies to not pay attention to all this. And I started paying attention to this the minute I heard about it, because a friend of mine was stuck in China. He went there for over the holidays for Christmas, and he hadn't and he went through that whole thing of he happened to be right in Wuhan, and they were quarantining, and we were hearing the stories, and I knew that this was not something to be messed with, so I've been really safe. I was in France right before this. I was in France doing a commission in this town called Deauville, and I was photographing for about 10 days or so. And as soon as we got on the freeway, we were starting to get ready to we need to go back home. This was in the last days of February, and I arrived home on March 1st, and I've basically been here at my house. With my son, and we've opened our bubble up more, have my assistant be able to work, and I've been able to print, and I've been able to make shows, and fortunately I have all my printing on site, so I've been able to continue to work, but it's really crazy time still.
Yeah, like, have you been taking pictures at all, or you just been kind of, like you said, it's been kind of printing and organizing, I guess?
I've pretty much been printing and organizing. I had a lot to do, because when I came back from that trip in France, I had to basically put together an entire exhibition that will be over there in October. I highly doubt I'm going to make it, because if they even let us into the country by then, it's still something that's like nobody knows what's going to happen in October,
Yeah, that's I was interested in talking about that, because a large part of your business is gallery shows where it's a social thing. With the galleries you work with, what's kind of been the conversation? How are you guys approaching it? I've seen some galleries are doing online shows.
Yeah,
people Zoom in. It's kind of different. But I guess what's kind of the conversation in that world for you, I guess?
Yeah, well, it's pretty much been at first, I don't think nobody knew what was going to happen. It was going to be this long, and so we didn't make any kind of a plan.
Yeah.
But and then the novelty of being home wore off real fast.
Yeah.
And everybody started to get a little bit concerned about well, how are we going to make a living, because we make a living from all the things. I had a job in Italy that was canceled to shoot this tile factory, alongside the pictures with Luigi Giri. Which would have been an amazing job, and that got canceled. I had supposed to be in some couple of art fairs this summer, couple of book fairs, totally canceled. Photo London canceled, Palm Springs Photo Workshop canceled. There's workshops in Montana, Charcoal Book Club canceled, and so when all that stuff just started to peel away, it was holy shit, and then you realize the thing about art is that it's a luxury to have art and to be able to buy art.
Yep.
I mean, I think it's a necessity for people, like, but you don't really, it's not essential, you know? And so really what happened, like through the first few months of it all, like we all just started to, start to think about, well, what can we do, and there are fortunately collectors that are not affected by all of the stuff happening. And then living in California in I live in Oakland, but Silicon Valley is like 30 minutes away. And there's a lot of people out here that are doing extremely well now, even better than before, which is really weird because everything's shifted to being online. And so there are some collectors that have been helpful and generous with galleries, because they know that, I can always fend for myself. I've always got a way to figure out how to make a living. But I worry sometimes about the galleries, the smaller ones, and they're totally dependent on art sales. I at least can do little things, or I can do commercial jobs if when they come up, but even those are complicated right now. Like there was one job I was going to do, and the people we were going to photograph didn't want to come to a certain neighborhood, because it was because they were up in the mountains in Tahoe, like hiding out. And it's like, well, we're not going up there either. So let's not do the job,
Yeah, it's tough, man. Like I got a buddy, he's a union, gaffer, down in LA, and he works on big, movies and stuff. And they're not working at all down there because none of the insurance companies want to sign off on these shoots where there's 100+ people. So it's
right. Yeah. It's crazy. Yeah. I saw on something the other day, a Zendaya and an actor performed in a movie that I don't know a lot of names in Hollywood, but the director of what's that show Zendaya's in, the one that's Euphoria.
Oh yeah, that's what it is.
You know her from the Disney show,
Spider-Man, or I think was she in Spider-Man? I don't even know.
She might have been. My kids used to watch her all the time, and then now she's like a superstar. But they made a film. The director of Euphoria wrote it for this a COVID a thing. It's not about. I don't think it's about COVID, but so they wrote it so they could small crew, didn't have a lot of scenes. And apparently they shot a feature-length film under quarantine, and everybody was only on the crew quarantined for 14 days.
Damn.
And they just did not leave the bubble, and they made a movie in 2 weeks.
Jesus Christ.
Right. So I think that's going to be I think there'll be things like that get people get real creative when they need to.
Yep.
Yeah. And then also you can trim the fat of a lot of things, and I mean, it's always amazes me how many people work on a film, and I'm sure everything's valid, but in every space there's a little bit of room to whittle down all the things you need and all the people you need, and you can do a lot with less, and that's kind of a common. I think we're going to be heading towards that a lot.
Yeah, even for myself, just through this process, because I mean, we both work in a freelance career, so you never know when the next job's coming. So I was just I went through my bills and stuff, and I just cut out all this bullshit that I didn't even need. And
right.
It just shows you don't need all this shit. I had all these subscriptions to shit I don't even hardly use, and it's just
right.
At the end of the day, what do you really need? You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. I've done the same exact thing, going through the bills. Do I really need all these cable channels? I watched 2 of them, and and then right before we talked, and as soon as we're done talking, I'm going to be working on refinancing my house, nice. Just to get everything as low as it can go. The one thing I will say for those of us that are it's hard for freelancers. It's a really it's hard to have a career that you're, if people got to call you so you can make money, and so I've been through this a little bit in 2008, when we had that recession there, and it was a similar kind of where there was shows that were happening at galleries, and the show before mine had sold 0 prints in it, which was really wow, I hadn't heard of that for anybody. And then I had a show, unfortunately, a music promoter, bought, he broke he christened the thing and bought a few prints, and then things started to roll again, but it was really a tenuous time. And so I've been through ups and downs, before, and somehow or another you get through, and you figure things out, and there's a thinning of like the world, like literally in this case, but like there's just a lot of things that sort of drop out
Mm-hmm.
that aren't necessary, and I don't wish that upon anyone, of course, ever. But like there is something that there's a sort of like the perseverant and high quality like things like seem to stick around. But anyway, we'll see how.
Because like I was gonna ask you that anyways, is like you're saying, like this career path, there's like so many ups and downs. Like obviously this time is like different than any time in history, COVID.
Absolutely, yeah.
But like overall in your career, like have you always just been able to, like, how do you manage those stressful times where it's ups and downs? It's just more you just have it in your mind that like you're not quitting, you're gonna persevere, or like how do you deal with that? Because it is, I know the feeling where it's like, oh man, because I mostly shoot like editorials, so there'll be like months where shit, man, like last month or so I haven't worked much. I'm like, fuck, am I ever gonna work again? It's like
right. No, yeah, I mean it's crazy, dude. I mean, I will tell you, even like I've been doing this for a while, like my last pay stub for like through my one of the people I work with was $109.
Yeah.
That's not going to even buy groceries. No. But how I deal with that is I save money. And I think that it's something like I came from a very working class background. Like I grew up, like my mom, we had food stamps and we didn't have any money. And I just like, whatever it is I've created for myself, like I've created it, entirely by myself. And well, my friends and family, of course, were part of that too, but and my assistants. Anyhow, I've had I've there's always a worry about that, and because to you have to balance out like the saving money factor with the your anxiety level, what you're willing to kind of work with. And so, but it's just good to know that there's, something in the, I have like if the shit hits the fan kind of a pile of what would happen if I had to like, I got no jobs, I have some stuff stashed aside so I can help me through that, for a few months,
Yeah. And looking at your work, it seems like you're interesting because you got your hands in a lot of different bags. Like you're obviously in the gallery world, you're doing the book thing, then you're doing like, I know you do commercial work too. So it's like, is it almost like you feel like you're almost like managing 3 different businesses at once? It's like the gallery is one thing, and then you got your commercial stuff over here, and then like might be like some collectors, and it's just it's like 3 different bags almost.
It very much is. It works that way, and because of that, actually, it's kind of like it's a good thing because if your sources of income all come from one place, it's kind of like don't put all your eggs in one basket, that old saying. And so there have been times when, the commercial art world has sort of been a little bit slower, but my artwork has done okay. And then sometimes they'll be like, I'll get a bunch of commercial jobs or maybe get an advertising job. And so things come and they go, and they're always like, they always sort of, a knock on wood, it's just they kind of just come at the right time. A lot of times, I try to do like, I have a working class background, and my work ethic is like, if somebody asks me to do something, and it's not an insulting amount of money, like, or some weird project, but like, I mean, I have a hard time saying no to things because you never know what's going to happen next.
Oh, definitely. Like I've had that many times where like I helped out like an agency, like on a pitch or something, and then it led to like a good job. And I'm the same way. I just like being busy. Obviously, you want to have a goal in mind, not busy to be busy, but it's like, like you said, you don't know what could lead to the next thing with that,
Yeah, and it's true. And one thing leads to the next, or sometimes you do something like when somebody doesn't have a whole, like, they don't have a big budget, but you want to do the project with them, and then it comes back around, and then like, oh, you're doing an ad with them next, or something like that. So it's it's good to just keep motivated and keep moving, and and then whenever things are whenever the pot needs stirred, I'll kind of like do stuff like like call people. I'll send people some pictures. I'll, post on Instagram. That's one thing that I started doing during the beginning of the pandemic. I just started hearing all this. I would watch the news all the time, and then I would hear all these new words and stuff, and I just started looking at my work and started thinking about how everybody was really kind of in the same boat of being stuck at home, isolated. We were having the same feelings and stuff. So I started posting on Instagram every day, which is something I hadn't ever done before. And it was really interesting how that sort of drummed up, a lot of attention towards my work that I was kind of recontextualizing, in this modern time, or one of my, quotes was quarantine and chill. That's old school now, but I think I might have thought of that in the very beginning.
Yeah.
And so, but just simple stuff, but people thought it was funny, and the thing that was really weird is my work is not funny at all, but when you add something, a little bit of humor in a tense situation, it actually really goes a long way of that humor. So
sure.
I really like that,
I think looking at your Instagram, I for getting ready for this interview, I scrolled through a lot of it, and I think it's it's always great when you see photographers who have been successful and people look up to, and you'll comment back with people that follow you and stuff. And I think it's so smart. Just for one, people are fans of you. They like that connection. But for you, because you're selling books and stuff, that little connection with someone that follows you, that could be a potential book sale for you. So I think it's so important. And I love seeing photographers that actually interact with the people that are supporting them or following them. So I kind of really respect that, because social media is a tough thing, but I think it's great for people. Yeah. It is a dialogue.
Yeah, very much so. And I always just remember I was all I was and I came out of high school doing photography, and there were people that there was no social media back then, but I followed photographers books on the bookshelves when they came out, and there were people that I loved, and I always remember that whenever I got a chance to meet somebody, I met Harry Callahan one time, and I was and he was just a total hero of mine, and I was and he didn't, I don't even know what he said back to me, but it was just, we had a dialogue. I think it was about printing. It was about he showed some slides of a show at MoMA that he had done many years ago, and all the pictures were they were really small, 8 by 10 was the biggest one. And I liked how he had them arranged on the wall, and it was really cool that he kind of he's it doesn't have to be bigger, it's not better, and just stuff like that, that's a saying that a lot of people know, but to have him say that to me, it meant a lot. And I have 20 examples like that. So I think it's important to be able to give back to the people that are paying attention to your work, and I really I make my work, firstly for myself, but have to have a following of people that like what I do, and and I've been blown away by some of the comments I get, about how, oh, I'm so happy you posted this today. It's a really hard time right now. It just kind of makes me happy, to see this stuff, and or even some nurses and doctors have written me and just say that they come out of their shift and they're oh my God, it's so happy. It's so great to see this beautiful sunset, in your work. Just to kind of remind people of what's out there, and then also, my work's a little there's an isolation, a part to it. And so it's sort of it just matches what's going on right now. So that's I guess a lucky thing. But it's also, I also work to recontextualize certain things to fall into that play. Because I always say that the meaning of an artwork resides in the viewer. Because it's and so you need the viewer to sort of complete it. I know what it means for me, but I try to make things that are, I guess, not dogmatic, but they're just. I like to make art that's ambiguous, that people can come to on a lot of different levels, or whatever level it is, or whatever place it is they're in.
Yeah. It's always interesting. because as an artist, you're looking at your work every day, and you're analyzing it for years and years every day. It's all you're thinking about. And when
Yeah.
when someone else comes out of left field and says something about your work, for me, I've had this happen. I'm like, wow, I never even fucking thought of that, because you think of yourself one way. So for me, it almost is kind of important sometimes to get a different perspective. Not always, because you as an artist, you have your own vision and you know what you want. But it is, even at your level, do you feel like, do you ever learn anything from people when they say something about your work, or is it more you're kind of just in your own lane doing your thing, you think?
No, I definitely like I've had the way I've looked at things change from what people have said before. But I'd say more importantly for me, I think what I get an affirmation that what I'm doing is connecting to somebody. And that's sort of like, it sounds kind of cheesy and corny, but like, but that's kind of a lot of the reason we make art is to connect with people.
Yeah.
And so I like when that it hits home with somebody. There was one comment that one of my favorite comments I've ever heard about my work was a comment on a blog, like a Tumblr blog, like,
yeah.
And the artist, the woman said, I've never met Todd Hido and he's never met me, but somehow he's making pictures of my memories.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, and so it's sort of like, it kind of shows that thing that, like, even in the beginning, we're all interconnected somehow or another, and it's not just through the trials and tribulations of our lives, but also just like the things that we see or the things that we feel, and all that. So.
Yeah, it is interesting to think, because you've over the course of your career, you probably sold thousands of prints, and they're living somewhere. They're living in someone's living room. They're living in someone's bathroom every time they go to the kitchen.
Yeah,
it's kind of interesting when you think about it that way. It's like, because you think about your home, the way you decorate it and stuff. It's like, it's like comes a part of your life. Like, anytime you move out of a house or something that you grew up in, it's like it can be like a sad thing. People don't want to get rid of stuff. And it's like your photo, it has like a new life to it when it goes to someone's home,
Yeah, absolutely. And I know about that because I have things like that for me too. Like, there's, fortunately as a photographer, how it is, you get to trade prints with people often, but like, but there are there's several things I've purchased, like a Harry Callahan print, like was something I had gotten. And it was, a long time ago, but it was, but it's something that's like, it holds a very special place in my house, and and other work that I have that I bought, like it means a lot to me. It's not just decoration or stuff that comes and goes. Like it's constantly on that wall, like all the time.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. How to go back, I guess, like how do you initially kind of get into photography?
I got started doing it by doing. I used to race BMX bikes, and I grew up in Ohio, and just like every kid today with an iPhone and a skateboard, if you're doing some tricks with your friends, you want to you got to show somebody else what you're up to.
Yeah.
And then if you don't record it, it's almost like it's gone. Excuse me. So basically, that's how I got started doing photography. I was racing BMX at these tracks. And I was a racer, not like a freestyler.
Was it like dirt? Was it like dirt tracks or like cement?
Dirt tracks. Yeah, dirt tracks. And I started by building them in the woods, and then a lot of my first pictures are like my friends and I, like just jumping little mounds of dirt that we dug up out of in the woods, and to make and cleared a path in these and made a track and stuff. And it was very cool. And then I started to do that, and then I just kind of got hooked. Took photography class then in high school, and then it just spoke to me immediately, and then I've been doing that ever since. So that's how I first picked up the camera. That was to kind of record me and my friends, on our bikes doing tricks.
That's cool, man. Do you ever remember? Because I was into BMX when I was younger. There's this guy. He was, I think, a track racer too. This guy Gary Ellis.
Yes, I remember that guy. I didn't know him, but he was probably from California.
Yeah, he was a ripper. He was on, I forget, what was the BMX magazine back then? Was it called BMX Plus?
Exactly. Yeah, I used to buy that all the time at the grocery store. And I at that point in time, I thought, oh, I'm gonna move to California and be a BMX plus photographer, and
Yeah.
that's what I would have wanted to do.
Yeah.
But that's exactly where I started right there.
That's amazing. And then you ended up going to college for photography.
Yeah. See, so I ended up going to a small school in Pittsburgh called the Art Institute of Pittsburgh because I didn't know where I came from. I came from Kent, Ohio,
Yep.
and it's a very I mean, Kent State University is there, but like there's not a lot of culture and stuff. Although there wasn't when I grew up there. It was like, if you want to, and we never went anywhere. I don't even know who Ansel Adams was, at that point. But I went to this small school, learned the trade of photography, and that was in Pittsburgh. And then I took a workshop at this place called Anderson Ranch. One of my photo teachers had heard about it, and it was something that seemed very interesting to me. So I went out there for this. It was in Colorado, and I took that class, and then I started to realize there was more to photography than just what we were doing at school, because it was a trade school. It was like more like
trying to teach you how to run a studio or something.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, literally, like some of one of our tests. I always remember, like our lighting test was. Our exam was like, okay,
Rembrandt.
The teacher would say, he would actually have you do it in front of him. He's like, all right, do some Rembrandt lighting on this, or like, where would you put the light to create the most texture on the subject? And then you'd move the light in the studio, and all that stuff was very, I don't know how, but it just came to me super naturally and very easily, and all the technical stuff was really easy for me, and so, but the thing that was missing was the concept and the art part of it. And so at these workshops, I learned this stuff, and then I learned of the bigger world of photography. And then I ended up going to school at the Boston Museum School.
Oh, yeah.
And that was where I really met the photography people that became the foundation of like what I am today. And that was like, everybody I worked with, all of my teachers either had Harry Callahan or Aaron Siskin as their teacher. And they were all like, most of them were from RISD, Rhode Island School of Design. In the late 60s and 70s, they went to school, and then they became teachers at the museum school. And then, so we had this really incredible crew of people, and even students that were in my photo school that were really just amazing, and I learned so much. And it was like I learned that it was a lifestyle. It was a life. You could have a life of photography. Mm-hmm. And then we had a teacher named Virginia Bean who would take us, like, she always wanted us to see, like, well, how do people do this? How does like Emmett Gowan make all this happen? So like, and Emmett Gowan happened to be her neighbor, and so she knew him well, of course, and so our whole class got to go to his house and stuff, and like, and go to his museum show in Philadelphia, which was a huge deal for us all. Like those are the things I'll never forget as long as I live. Like, I'll never forget going to Emmett Gowan's house and going into his dark room, and it would be like and it was a room that in any Midwestern house would have been the sewing room, but it was Emmett's dark room, and then you're like, okay, wow, this is just a room. It even has windows that he's blocked out with, like, velvet and stuff. And his negatives are all just stacked up right there in front of the enlarger. And it's just kind of like, wow, like, this is not complex. You don't need to have this crazy studio to make incredible art. And then we had seen his pictures at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. And it was just some of the greatest prints I've ever seen in my life. And then all of a sudden, it's like you're standing where they were made, literally. And it was like, but you connect the dots, and you're like, oh, this is not complex. It's just, you just do it, and you don't need a lot to do it. You don't need a lot of stuff to do great things. And so I always remember like learning that stuff, which is cool.
What kind of stuff were you shooting back in, like when you were at the museum school? Was it similar to the stuff you're doing now, or what do you remember?
No, it actually was really different. It was, I was very, as everybody probably is, like, you're very much influenced kind of by your surroundings and the people you're with. And everybody at that point in my world of photography was like they were like Harry Callahan, and like like 8x10 was a big print,
Yeah.
and there was where there was people that did color, but they were it was more like a cult of color, and it wasn't really like my thing. But I never printed one color picture at the Boston Museum School. But so we were doing like my work was black and white. It was all like small prints. They were maybe like 6 by 7 inches, and they were very much like timeless subjects, like trees but there was a mood, or there were landscapes and portraits, which is something that's maintained.
Yeah.
But there was a mood to it that was developing, that is sort of is where that's stuck with me. And then I even did a few still lifes back then, and then eventually I moved out to California after working as a photographer's assistant for a man named John Goodman in Boston.
Oh yeah, that guy's a badass photographer. I always remember. I loved it. He did like a whole series on boxing and like.
Yep, exactly. Yep, exactly. I actually printed many of those prints. Wow. And then ironically, like coming back, just to go back a little notch, because this is interesting stuff for students to hear, is that how did I get a job for him? I got a job not for him, with him. I got a job with him because I like at school I learned how to print really, really well.
Yep.
And I was and am really good at that. And I went, and I remember I saw his like next to his studio was above the photo lab everybody dropped their film off at. And so I would see it. I would see his name and I'd pick it up on the mailbox. And I was like, one day I just went and knocked on his door, not knowing any better. And then just said, hey, I wonder if you guys were, look, I want to share my portfolio with you and stuff. Like, just again, like really naive. Like, I wouldn't do that today, but like, but anyway, but like his assistant let me in and he said, he's not here, but like, why don't you come back tomorrow? And then I saw my prints and he was like, I want you, he said, would you like to print my portfolio for me? And I was like, sure. He had a dark room right there. And then I had a job and I started the next day, and I spent months printing his portfolio, reprinting his portfolio, because this is back in the day when we had to have call it your book, and it was your leather bound, custom made leather bound portfolio, that everything is carefully printed in, and it's fetishized over, and it's like the thing that gets you jobs at that point in time. And it was, and so I redid his whole setup, and then next thing you know, there's like a job comes in. Oh, he's in the dark room. Ask him if we can work on a job tomorrow. And I would be like, yeah, I can do it. And then like I just got hooked in, and then ended up becoming his first assistant after a couple of years. And that was really good. And that was an important experience for me, because I learned one of the things I learned from John, really a lot of it was I learned how to get shit done, and how to talk to people, and how to negotiate things, because he had a big open studio with the only walls were the darkroom walls, but the rest of it was an open studio. And a lot of times it was just him and I, and this is before email. And so everything that ever happened in and out, imagine your whole inbox spoken out loud all the time. Like, so there's nothing, everything, you hear every conversation. And so I just would listen, and I learned how to like negotiate. I learned how to get people to get things done. I learned how to, get a job, from an agency or something, or a magazine, or I knew how to learn how to finish a job and all that. And so it's just invaluable. And then also just like the fact that you could just get a lot of things done in like one day. I sometimes was blown away by how much we actually would do in a day, where it would take it would take a month for a college student to do that much work, So that was cool. So that was the whole black and white world for me. And he was like, those pictures from the Times Square gym are amazing. Really beautiful. And it was fun to see him make those and then start to print them, because they were just so dark and beautiful. Really,
I loved them because it was like, when I first looked at them years ago, I think I was in college, and I was like, oh, photos don't all need to be sharp. Like, you can be like blurry.
Yes.
And
absolutely.
I was like, this is so great. Like, so some of my favorite photos, like they're like so blurry you can hardly even tell what it is. Like it's just like a boxer like at a bag or something. It was just it was like eye-opening to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me too, you know. But yeah, so after that, after I worked with him, I ended up going coming to California to go to graduate school.
Yeah.
And
why did you want to go to graduate school? Did you think you were going to be a teacher, or like?
Yeah, well, two things. One is I knew there was more out there for me to learn, and I always had, like, for me, like, it's interesting. It's because I learned photography, commercial photography first, and then I learned about art photography later. I always had in my back pocket that I could make a living doing photography with the skills that I knew. And like you said, you can open a photo studio somewhere and bang, you're like the town photographer. Actually, that sounds appealing right now, actually. But there's other, but I knew there was other stuff, and I really responded to the art photographers, you know, like Emmett Gowan and Sally Mann, and that kind of work was really what that kind of black and white, sort of atmospheric, sort of dramatic work. That's what moved me, and I wanted to go out and make something out of that. And so I ended up coming out here, and then I knew that because of that, because half my time in art school was spent, you know, at more of a technical school.
Yep.
Like there was still a lot of things I did not know, and I wanted to, you know. And then one of my best classes I ever had was like the history of photography, and I loved looking at pictures and seeing things. And so I just knew there was more to go for me. And I always remember Harry Callahan. He said this, that going to graduate school is like it's like you're giving yourself a grant for 2 years to just focus on your work, you know. And that was a good thing for me, because I remember that, because just when I worked for John Goodman, I mean, I'd work, you know, more than 40 hours a week. You know, sometimes we'd go away on jobs for like 14 days in a row, and I couldn't do anything for myself during that period. So I really was very much very open and ready for like an academic experience. And then that's just kind of what I did. But I do have a thing to say for anybody listening, is that, you know, it's really, really important to not get out of undergrad school and then go directly into graduate school. It's much better if you got to pay your rent first alone, you know, so you can understand what it's like to live and how hard it is to live and make a living. And then after you do that, then you can go to graduate school, because you'll appreciate it 10,000 times more.
Yep.
If you've struggled a little bit and paid your rent. And then I'm talking like 20 somethings, you know, but their parents still pay their rent.
Because like that 2 years in grad school, like no time in your life ever again are you gonna have 2 years to work on your work, because like as you know, you get older, you got a family, you got a mortgage, you got all that shit. Like when are you ever gonna have having 2 weeks to work on a project? That's it. That's like a gift. If you can ever do that, that's a gift.
Totally. I mean, even where I'm at now, it's real. I can barely find 2 weeks to do something like exclusively. But 2 years, like, that's just crazy. So it is a gift, and it makes you appreciate it. But if you just go right from one school to the next, it's just a continuation of, like, you know, your naive self. You know, it's better to go to grad school when you're understand more about life, you know, and what it takes to do it, you know.
Because did you have like a goal in mind, like what you wanted to do like after grad school? Was it like the gallery thing and like books? Was that always your goal? Because it's talking to you, like you had this experience in the commercial world and then you go to grad school. Was there a goal, or what do you think it was you wanted to do?
I think the goal was that I wanted to show my work in galleries, and that I'd been turned on to, like, you know, like the museum world and seeing shows and going to New York, you know, going down to, like, we lived in Boston, but I would go to, we go to New York like every month and just, you know, go see, like, you know, hundreds of galleries in a weekend. And I was really plugged into that kind of thing about, like, and then the book thing kind of, I always was interested in books, but that sort of took off more later on. But like, I just kind of knew that like I wanted to be like those people that I saw, like Emmett Gowan, you know, or Harry Callahan, or like I knew that if they had a life of photography, like I wanted to have something like that too. Or my teachers, you know, that were teaching and making art, you know, like Jim Dow, you know, and Bill Burke was one of my teachers at the museum school. And anyway, it was and Virginia Bean. I liked what the life they led and how it was centered around this photography thing that we all are crazy about, you know.
And did you ever feel any pressure? Like so many photographers feel like they need to move to New York if they want to have a career. Like,
you know, that's a great question. I myself, like I grew up in Ohio, in a small town, a college town, and all around cornfields everywhere around there. And then I moved to Pittsburgh, which was a big city for me. And then I moved to Boston, and that was a bigger and more important city. And then I went to New York constantly. And when I lived in Boston, we would go there every month for sure. And I'd go down there and get recharged, you know, and you'd see stuff and it would be like, you know, man, this is like fills me up with new ideas and new things. And then, but when graduate school came along, I had been out west before just to travel out here, and I really liked it here. I remember like was August in San Francisco, and I was like, shit, you need a coat, man, to even be outside. It's like freezing, and it was one of those 90 plus degree summers like on the East Coast, and I remember like, and I hated that. Yeah. That's what I grew up with, and I was like, I think this California place could be interesting. So I ended up applying to grad school here, and I got in, and I applied to other places too, and accepted in the East Coast. But I was like, I'm going to make a big change, you know, because I quit that job working for John Goodman to go to graduate school, and I'm like, you know, I should just go all the way across the country and just do this that way. And I'm really glad that I did, because it was a total like immersion in a very different kind of group of people. Like everyone was doing large color prints, you know, things were very conceptual based. Yeah. And there was just a different vibe going on that I liked very much. And I had already started to transition a little bit, like when I was just making pictures for myself. Because the one thing I did do that, like when I worked for John Goodman and I had that 40-hour job week, I would still come home and like, I would go out and shoot on the weekends, and I would come home at night and print pictures of my tiny, tiny dark room that was like no bigger than a bathtub, you know, yeah. In this pantry I had in the kitchen. And so I kept doing my work, but it was changing as I was, you know, growing. And so I decided to come here, and that was a great choice for me, because it was like being in this different environment with different kind of people, and that sort of automatically changes your work too, you know.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, nowadays I think you can kind of live anywhere. I mean, there is definitely an advantage to like living in New York, because you're gonna bump into people and meet people that way just from going to all those shows and stuff. But I think for me, I live in like a small town in Massachusetts, and for me, I love it. It's like, for me, it's like an added like pressure. I'm like, I'm gonna get mine, like living out here in this small town. Like I don't need to live in New York, you know.
Right.
It's a different challenge, but I kind of like it, you know.
Yeah, and I think that's right, because it's something. The one thing that I've never actually wanted to live in New York. I love New York, but I never actually wanted to live there, you know. And then when I was out here, I remember getting out of grad school. It was going to be over, and then I remember asking my teacher, Larry Sultan,
legend.
Yeah, total legend. He was incredible, you know. And I didn't even know how legendary he was, you know, when I first met him. But anyway, I said, you know, what should I do? Should I like move to New York or stay out here? And he was like, you know what, I would stay here and then then make a name for yourself and get your work out there. And then when you go to and then when your work becomes something, they will ask you to show it in New York, and you'll enter New York in this lateral position of because there's the art world hierarchy and all that shit like that. I mean, it's real, but like so my first time I had a show in New York was, I was asked to be in a show, and it was with really great artists in a gallery, in Chelsea, and it was and I was like, damn, he's right, and then that thing turned into a show.
How'd that opportunity come about? Like,
yeah. How that came about was I'll just backpedal a tiny bit just to sort of make it all make sense. So I started doing the houses at night when I was in graduate school. That's when I started doing color photography. And that's when I started doing night photography, because that whole idea of I've moved 3,000 miles away from where I used to live. I should try new things, do different things, not just do the same thing. And so I started experimenting. Like, one was shooting color, 2 was printing color. Never knew how to do that. And then the other one was, night photography, because it was something that I was just out one day and it got dark and I just kept seeing things, and I just kept on shooting. I remember from some reciprocity failure assignment, like way back when, you're like, well, if you just expose it for a long time, you can't go wrong, with neg film. And it's true. It's totally true. It's like, you can bake that shit, and it just, the highlights will just stop baking at some point. Anyhow, so I was doing that stuff, and then I ended up, started working on, houses at night, and I made one of them, and I like it. It wasn't an idea that I had. I made one for this one class on a narrative workshop. It was a class about like just making narratives with pictures that Larry taught with this a filmmaker, and so we did. So that I was just making an establishing shot house, kind of like, you come back from the commercial, or the Brady Bunch house, like they flash on the house, and then, or there's often a house at night on those things. So I thought, I'll just make a house at night, and then there'll be pictures of people, and it'll make a story, very basic. And then, but I liked that picture. That picture ended up being really interesting, and I made another one, and then I was like, wow, there's 2. And I started like going around, and I found this great neighborhood that I really liked that had fog, and it had fog most of the time in the summer, especially. That's how the weather is out here. Like in the summertime, it's foggy at night, almost every night. And so basically, so that I just started doing it, and then one after the other, and I wander around and I drive around in my car, and just, that's how I've always made pictures, just driving around and looking at stuff. And then I got those together, and then there was a show coming up called Bay Area Now, and it was a show. It was one of the first Bay Area biennials at a museum here, and I was asked to be in that. I had like 7. I'd made 7 photos at that point that went together. And that's all I needed to like have a small part of this group exhibition.
Wow.
And so so those worked. And then from that show, the gallerist that I worked with and really helped me in the beginning of my career was a Stephen and Connie Wirtz, called the Wirtz Gallery. Yep. They had in San Francisco, they had they asked me to be, they liked that work I hung, and they're like, hey, would you like to have a show? And of course I'm like, yes, I would like to have a show. And so it turned out that, about 8 months later, after I made more work, and I ended up having about 19 or so photographs of those houses, I ended up, it was on the wall, and people really liked it. And it got written about in Art Forum. And it was in, it wasn't even a review. It was like a feature in Art Forum. And, wow. And that was really lucky. And that was how I just leaped to New York, because I remember the day after that came out, people were calling the gallery to buy prints from them. And then people were asking me to be in shows and group shows. And then
Just
the
kind
show.
of, it kind of builds. You kind of,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It just all builds slowly. One person sees something, and it just, and then somebody else. And I remember like the show was, called Neighborhood Watch. And it was, I was in it, and I remember Gregory Crutzen was in it, and I'm trying to remember the other artists in it, but it was a small little show at Julie Saul Gallery, and excuse me.
no worries.
And so after that, it just started to. I had a show, then they liked my work, and they asked me to have a show, and then one thing leads to another, and it just kind of accumulates, and then once you get the snowball rolling a little bit, and if the work is good and it's like people like it, things just kind of progress, because the world is always looking for something new. Mm-hmm. And they and it's really good to be able to have just to have your work. And then, but the one thing that I didn't do is I waited until my work was ready to be seen out in the world, and I didn't try to push it too hard in the early days. I was definitely ambitious, but I wasn't like knocking on every door. Mm-hmm. I was just kind of, waiting around, making my work, letting something happen. Something good would come out of that, and I'd let something else. I'd work a little bit more, and then, and then the same thing happened with like book publishing for me. Like I was like, I never. It's funny now because the world has changed so much, and the book market, the bookmaking thing has changed so much since when I first started. But like, I never. I mean, a photo book was something that's like, oh yeah, maybe a 20-year retrospective, I'll have a book,
Yeah.
and that's kind of what I had in my head. I wasn't like. I never expected anything more than that. And, but I loved books though. And I was constantly looking at them, and I was always, whenever I could scrape the money together to get something, I would. And basically like, but I was also interested in making books, and because of my interest in narrative and magazines and stuff like that, I would, put my pictures in books, and I kind of just started to make book dummies, and I would make things, even though I wasn't their intention wasn't to like, here's my book dummy, publish it please. It was more for me to sort my photos or think about my photos, because books are really cool that way, that if you have a body of work that you're thinking about, and you want to try to make sense of it, it's really good to use a blank book and just start to put pictures in and turn pages. And then it helps you sort of figure out your story, if there is one, but the thing about books that are important is like, every time you pick up a book and you look at it, you expect something from it, expect like, something to come out of that experience. Like, maybe it's, but it has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Mm-hmm. And galleries aren't like that. Gallery is just, it's a white wall, you can't control which wall they see first. And it's a much harder to figure something out when you can see all the pictures at one time. But because in a book, you're not seeing everything at once. You're seeing a picture, you're turning the page, you see another picture, the other one goes away, and then now you have this picture, and then you turn the page with a memory of that picture, and then
it kind of like
it
kind of like slows things down for you, because you can like sit down on your couch and just kind of take your time with it.
Absolutely. And it's a really helpful way to sort out your pictures and figure out your work. So I've always did that. And then and I had a show. I was in an art fair in the year 2000. I guess it was 2000. A photo fair in San Francisco, and my publisher, my longtime publisher, Chris Pickler of Nazraeli Press, he saw my work on the wall there, and he liked it, and I was I was actually buying a book from him, and he's like, I like your work, and I was like, oh, I like your work too. We just kind of started talking, and we hit it off, and I wasn't trying to show him anything, or like say, it was just like, we both were mutually liked what we did. And then he said, hey, like, we should talk about making a book or something like that, and I was, and of course I was like, fuck yeah, but like, and I remember I was, we made an appointment for a couple weeks later, and I met him at his apartment, and we we've been making books ever since then. And it's been a constant thing. And I think I've made there's like 7 or 8 like monographs we've done together, and several little things.
Does it trip you out? Because I was looking at some of your older books that like are like not in publication right now, so you gotta buy them like used and stuff. And like some of them, they go for like over $1,000, man. That's gotta be
crazy.
That's gotta trip you out, because like it's pretty wild.
Yeah, it's very wild. It's a strange thing sometimes, and it's and I've been lucky that I like, that my books have been able to they sell, and that's really and that's also key to being able to make more, and because sometimes even like like I would be like, hey, we should reprint that, and he's like, maybe we should just make a new book, instead, and so that's been good, that he's helped me like have a vehicle to get my work out, and pretty much like the way it sort of flipped around, where I'd say that the books are sort of the thing that like really gets the work out in the world. And I think a lot of people have seen my work that way. I mean, of course, the internet is huge, and but books are like, the thing I like about books is like they're always there. They're forever. A gallery show is like, not that many people actually see it. If in comparison to like how many people could see a book,
because there's like a bunch of people. There's a bunch of people in Nebraska that have your book, but they've never been to any of your shows.
Yeah, exactly, and that's fascinating. That's what I like about the books. You can like, it's like your own personal like museum you get to take home.
And with like one thing I was going to ask you, I think a lot of like younger photographers can like look at your website. Like you've been in these amazing galleries. I think you're like in the Getty collection, the Whitney, MoMA. When you're starting out, obviously you have dreams of being in these amazing like institutions or whatever. Did you ever feel like an outsider in this business? Because a lot of times I think looking at these, like they're like these pillars of like, they're the top. So it almost feel like, that's for like special people or something. Like,
I've never like, I mean, I've had that feeling of like being a young photographer and going to New York and going to all these places and like, and wanting to be in there, and I always wanted to like see my work there. And so I just kept, but I never said to myself that it wasn't for me. I would look at it and try to figure out like, like how can I like, I would like, what kind of frame is that? Oh, that's an 8-ply mat board, with a white wood frame. I'd look at that. Oh, the mat's 5 inches wide. And I would like just pick up things from these shows, and I learned how what the look was, and because I liked it, I didn't do it because it was what they were doing. I like if I noticed somebody like frame their work in a certain way and I liked it, I would try it out, to see if that worked for me. And so basically I would just kind of learn things like that, and just kept trying, and then I think that like making, but the thing I didn't do was in the very, very beginning of it all, I just worked really hard on my work. And and when I felt that my work was of a level that could be in those places, that's when I started to talk to people about showing it, and then again, there's just lucky things like those people, the curators of Bay Area Now, in 1998, that's a long time ago. And these 3 guys came to my apartment. I had this tiny apartment that we could barely fit in this apartment, all of us, because all of a sudden there were 4 people and my work. And, the stuff was like laid out on my bed and shit like that. It was just like, but that's what, but they loved that, because they're like, oh, this is a young artist. This is the real deal. And it's not somebody putting on a show. It's
your life. It's
your life. Yeah.
It's all, you're so invested in it. It's every day, 24 hours a day.
Yeah, exactly. And they recognize that. And so I think that just being passionate about what you do, and just trying to make your work as good as you can make it. And I find that if you can just make it really good and then put it out a little bit and then just see what happens, like things kind of happen, from there. And then luckily, I mean, like when all that was going on for me, like people, we still weren't using the internet like we do now. It was like just like when I moved to San Francisco, that's when I heard somebody say, "Oh, you should check out Yahoo, man. Everyone's doing it." And I was like, "What the fuck is Yahoo, man?" And what do you do with it? Like, and that was like when I started grad school, and that's how far we've come, or how old I am.
No,
I actually turned 52 in August.
You're young, Tom, man. You're just getting started, man. You're in your prime right now.
I am. Believe me, I am. That's why I'm not going to catch this COVID, man. I'm staying home. Like, my son gets my groceries and stuff, and
nice.
I just do the. It's good that we can talk. Is that before it would have been hard to set up a time for me to talk. I would have been flying off to some thing to make some pictures or some show somewhere, and I've actually I've really enjoyed circling back to what we were talking about in the beginning. I've enjoyed sort of just, I've been out there so much. Like the last couple of years I flew like 50,000 miles a year. And I've only been on one flight this whole year. That was coming back from France right before the COVID kicked in. And I'm kind of fine being at home right now, for a while more. It's okay with me. I'm going to use this time to sort my work and do things and, edit and print and somehow I'll figure out how to make pictures. I can go out and shoot in my car anytime, but I've been trying to focus on just working with what I got. One thing I miss, I will say, is portraits.
Yeah.
That's a period, being I'm a half portrait photographer, half places.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking today, how could I have a little studio downstairs and, I could do a socially distanced portrait. I mean, they're all socially distanced anyway. It's not like you don't get that close to people. But a model could, just be standing there, and if you're wearing your mask and you're as far away as you should be, which is 6 feet anyway.
Yeah, it's tough, man. Yeah, because I'm in the same boat. Like, all my work is people. That's basically all I shoot. And I'm like, I haven't really shot anything in 4 months just because it's like you said, you can probably do it. But then in my mind, I'm like, there's still this social responsibility to be safe. So I haven't done it yet, but I'm I'm in the same boat. I'm going through withdrawals here because it's
right. Yeah, because you need to do it, right?
Yeah.
It's true. I think you'll figure it out. I think you could do you're the person you're photographing. Mm-hmm. They don't have to wear a mask, while they're in the picture. And if you're standing back far enough, and if you could do it outside, it would really make it makes that's the other thing I do is I watch the news all the time. I could be on any CNN panel and hold my own right now. Literally. And so basically outside activities are much safer than inside activities. And then, who knows, mate, I don't know. It could change your work, in an interesting way. That's one thing that I'll be curious to see is how will this dilemma that we have about not being able to work or not being able to do certain things, how might that change our photography? I don't know the answer, but it'll be interesting to see over time. Yeah,
it's been interesting to see people do it. Frank Ockenfels has been doing he's a beast, man. That guy.
I know him. Yeah, he's great.
He's just doing Zoom. It was crazy. He's just doing FaceTime photo shoots, but you wouldn't even know it's any different than his other work.
Oh, that's interesting. It's amazing. He's got a lot of energy. That guy. I really like him very much.
Yeah.
That was one of the things that I was very sad to have canceled is the Palm Springs Photo Festival that happens every year, and Jeff Dunas puts together.
Yep.
And I was going to be teaching there. I've been teaching there for years, and Frank does too. Mm-hmm. Frank goes every year and does something, and it's been nice to get to know him over the years from that. But he's a great guy, and and he's got a studio in his backyard, also, and but I like his energy, wild, and I can see how he would not slow down, during this process. He'll just figure out how to do. I have to look up his stuff and see what he's been doing.
Yeah, he did a whole cover for the Hollywood Reporter, maybe
awesome.
a month ago. It was all this remote shooting. It was pretty nuts.
That's cool. Interesting. Wow.
Yeah. One thing I was getting interested in talking to you about is once you get, because I think you were saying, when you started out, you kind of got known for that house hunter stuff you were doing at night. once you kind of get discovered and people start to know you for a certain type of work, do you feel like you need to like stay within that style to like keep moving forward, or do you not even like kind of worry about it?
No, it's actually something those are the kind of things that I do worry about. But here's what I've learned, like over the years, is that I learned this. The woman Connie Wirtz, I mentioned her. She's passed away, fortunately, before all these things happened. But last year she passed away. But she taught me so many lessons. And I remember when I had that first show at her gallery. I remember I brought down, like, I had my houses at night. And that was going to be in my show. And then I've always loved looking in the back room of galleries, like where they have just random works of art hanging around or on the wall. And I brought a portrait down and a black and white print that I had down. And this is like when my first real show. And she's like, oh, no, you need to take that stuff back home. When people are trying to figure out who you are, you don't want to confuse them with other images, and she's like, just you can make whatever you want, but right now let's just focus on houses at night, and let's just show that. And that's what our show is. Cause people like, she liked to like let the audience, cause sometimes that like she would say that, like, and again, there's different consumers for photography. There's collectors, and then there's people like us that love photography, that look at it all the time, think about it all the time. Yeah. There's students, like, but like with the collectors, she would just say, like, sometimes they just get confused and they just want to be able to say, like, oh, that's the guy that shoots the Mississippi River, and who that is, because he got well known by sleeping by the Mississippi, and you didn't hear about his other projects because that's what he was shot that work. And then of course he's branched out a lot, like I have and other people do. But for the time being of that first immersion, and where people like want to figure out who you are, being not having too much stuff or too many different things is I think important. And so I just kind of did that. And then the next thing I did was interiors, and that made sense with houses. Mm-hmm. And then the next body of work after that, like I did house hunting and I did outskirts. And those were two pretty much nighttime suburban houses or landscapes, with a few interiors sprinkled in. And just so it wasn't so monotonous. And then after that, I was like, then I really was worried. Okay, I don't want to be stuck in this trap of just being this person that does houses at night only. Suburban
neighborhood.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so like the next book I did was called Roaming. Mm-hmm. And it was going to be it was landscapes, because I've been shooting those. I've always had multiple interests in photography. Like I've always done portraiture. I've always done landscapes. I fortunately found house shooting at night, but like I've always done interiors, and I have these different kind of like, just sort of stacks of pictures, that I would just kind of pile on, because I get weird when I don't work, and so it's good for me to like always have something to like. I can go out and take pictures and then come back with something that will go in one of those stacks, Yeah. And so I always made the pictures, but in releasing the photographs, or it was important to sort of like stick with that first bundle of houses at night, and then very, very strategically, not super, but I really thought about this a long time. Mm-hmm. I was going to do landscapes, and there'll be no houses in that book at all.
Yeah.
But there were some landscapes at night.
Yep.
And so it was like, that looks like his work. And then what's this blurry picture through the window?
Yeah. It is interesting, because I guess because I don't come from like the gallery side of things at all. So when you talk about collectors, it's an interesting perspective, because like you said, like we love photography, like, but for a collector, they're not going to buy a Jeff Koons piece that's like a black and white print. They want the Jeff Koons piece so they can like brag to their friends that, hey, that's my Jeff Koons crazy fucking like purple statue or whatever.
Right, exactly. And they're they operate on a whole nother like wavelength, and fortunately the gallery deals with them. And that's how they get their 50%, they do earn it very much so.
No, definitely.
Yeah. yeah, and so then I just started to push out, and I did some more landscapes, and then when I started I did a book on portraits, and people were like, "You do portraits? Oh my God, I can't even imagine," And then it's sort of people were kind of like, "What's this?" And then but the audience catches up, and then and then eventually, like one of my favorite books that I've done was called Excerpts from Silver Meadows, and it was with Nasralli, and it has 130 photographs in it, and most of my other books had like 26 or 35 pictures in it, like not many pictures. That's another thing, you don't need a lot of pictures sometimes, but for this other book, Excerpts, I did need them because I was all of a sudden revisiting this whole idea of these complicated narratives.
Because it almost looks like the book's like almost like a collage in a sense.
It very much is a collage, and then there'll be double gatefolds that will open up, and there literally will be a collage of images. There'll be like a house on the outside of the gatefold, and then maybe like a person, and then you open the gatefold up, and then there's this whole messy story of this person's life inside this gatefold. That kind of like, it's like, whoa, like what's going on there? Like, and then there's old photographs. There's photographs that I found photographs. There's pictures that I made them, but to look old, or I would use a 126 like snapshot camera, and like with a flash, and it looked like, a snapshot from their family album, but I made it like, that week. So that was sort of a time when everything was opened up. And then all of a sudden, like the work was really complicated. But it took me like, 6 or 7, it took me like maybe actually longer, like 10 years of just kind of doing books that had single subjects in them, like houses at night, landscapes, rainy landscapes, interiors, people. And then I got to do the whole kit and caboodle in one, which I think is the most complex book I have. And I like that one very much.
Yeah, because it's kind of a look back into like your old roots in Ohio, right?
Oh, absolutely, and it came from that. There's some photo collectors in Ohio, Fred and Laura Bidwell, and they were people that ironically, everything is so connected. Like they bought one of my pieces of art at Julie Saul Gallery in New York, which is the very first place I talked about showing. That was like that neighborhood watch show, and so they didn't buy the work from that show, but like a year later I had a show. But that's how they got to me, from that gallery. They bought a piece of mine, and then at least 15 years later, there's another person from Ohio, was out in San Francisco, bought a piece of my work. And then he heard I was coming back home for summertime for like a week or so. And he was like, "Hey, we have this photo group. We have this photo forum group. Like most museums have like these collector groups where there are people that are interested in learning about photography, and they also help the curators, like, decide, which pieces do they want to put in the collection, and they also are the ones that end up giving the curators the money to buy the work. For the museum. It's a very important fundraising function. But the people in these groups are they're on a serious level of collecting.
Okay.
But they're also curious people, and so what they do is they'll like take a whole group to like Paris Photo LA, or they'll do like, oh, we're having an evening. Todd Hido's coming to John's house, and he's going to talk about his work in the living room, to like with 15 people. And so I did that, and then I met this woman, Laura Bidwell, and I remember your name. I think you guys bought one of my pieces a long time ago, and we just started talking, and we connected, and then I ended up. We learned that like they lived down the street from my parents, like not in the same neighborhood, but just like 30 minutes down the road, from my family. So I started going there every Christmas. I go home for Christmas, and I would go, and I was like, I'm going to go visit Fred and Laura, and then I would go and I'd sit, at their couch with their coffee table, and we would just shoot the shit like we're doing right now, and talk about all the new things we've seen this year, because they travel a lot and they go to things. And they just love photography. And so they ended up, opening up. One of the times I was there, they were like, oh, we're going to actually open a photo museum in Cleveland. And I was like, really? Huh, that's okay. Go for it. And then, and then we bought a power station, an old transformer station, and then it's funny because like a lot of times, and you hear stories about people doing that, and then there's a lot. It's really, really hard to do that. It's a lot of work. But they somebody just dropped something downstairs. I don't know if you heard that, but
it's all right.
Okay, yeah, but you can cut that part out. But so they bought a power station, and it was like wow, and they made it into a museum, and then I was again not looking for anything from them, and they were like we just had a friendship over photography, and then I was going to their house because I liked them. And they had good photo books, that I hadn't seen, and so then just getting to be friends every for like 3 or 4 winters in a row. But one time they were like, "Hey, we want you to have the first show in our new Cleveland, Ohio photography only museum, the first of its kind in Ohio." And then we also want to like help you make your work for the show, because we'd love it if the show had you're from Ohio, we're in Ohio, there's not a lot of people that have come out of this area that have done what I'd done in photography, and then basically it was like a perfect thing, and it just happened. And so that's how that Excerpts from Silver Meadows came about, because it was work that was going to be centered around where I grew up and my neighborhood. And the environment of Ohio, and the mood of Ohio, and the weather of Ohio, and all that. And so that's how that all kind of came together, was just from that, and it was really exciting to be able to put a show up on the walls of where I came from, basically.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's almost like a self-portrait of yourself, kind of.
It is. It's very weird. And then my dad, the only time I've ever had a show where my entire family went. I remember there's a picture of my dad, and they're like from high school, like of him on the football or wrestling or football team, and he was like, and I blew it up kind of big. Yeah. And he and it was a part of a narrative. And then at the show, he would be like, "Hey, that's me. That's me." He would say, like, "This is me, you guys." To all these random people, it was fucking hilarious.
What did your family think about you getting into photography? Were they like supportive, or did they even understand it? Or
I don't think that they definitely did not understand it. I think that they thought that I would go away to school and I would come back home. That I'd be back home at some point, Yep. And because actually, where I came from, that's what a lot of people did,
Yep.
They, and then there's nothing wrong with that. My brother did that. My brother went to school in France, and then was in Cameroon, and now he's the vice principal of our school where we went to school.
Wow, that's
high
cool.
School. Yeah. I mean, he's the guy that would be like getting your ass in trouble. I always ask him, like, all right, give me some stories, man. Like what's happened lately?
I can't imagine going to school now. I think of it now, like, because when I was in high school, we didn't have cell phones yet. Towards the end, we had cell phones, but now it's like Wikipedia, internet. It's got to be fucking nuts to be a kid in school. Like, imagine getting bullied like when we were like in school pre-internet. Now it's like kids are on the Facebook, and kids are fucking ruthless.
Yeah, they're ruthless. Yeah, I remember like getting in fights, after getting off the school bus, and but like never, we never had that. The internet we actually got into real fights.
Yeah, it was like, I'll meet you behind the bleacher. Yeah. I remember that shit.
Yeah, exactly. It's totally true. Yeah. So but anyway, but it was I don't know where that leaves us, but it was it's interesting to make work about your life, and again, and I would call it like a loose autobiography. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing that happened with that work is that it ended up getting into like telling other people's stories, because you can only like talk about yourself for so long. Yeah. And then you got to get interested. And then like I mentioned earlier, I could watch television news a lot, and I would just like to be stories on the news that would just sort of seep into what I was doing. and I'd sort of like just, think about that stuff and just, just all kind of like, gels together somewhere, and then when you put two pictures together, it's magic. Sometimes the stories you can tell.
Oh, definitely. You cool for going for a couple more minutes? I said like.
Yeah. Can we pause for 1 second? I got a drink of water.
Yeah. Get a water.
Yeah, I'll be right back. Okay.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay.
Cool.
I'm back.
Cool. Sorry. Yeah, there's a couple more things.
Yeah, sure.
Cool. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, no problem.
You know what's interesting? Like having looked at your work for years, like you in your mind, like you create an idea of like what a person might be like. Cause like before I did this interview, I was like, cause a lot of your photos are very like moody. And I was like, oh, I wonder what this guy's going to be like. Is he going to be very like tough to talk to? And it's very much the opposite. So it's kind of
right.
It's interesting. Cause from looking at people's work, it's like, oh, maybe he's like a super introverted, like,
right. Yeah.
tough guy or something. You know what I mean? So it's kind
of It's curious because like I hear that a lot, that like that I don't match my work. But it's interesting because I think I get all that out in my work.
Yeah.
My work is very cathartic for me.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that I really like. I get all my stuff out in that.
Yeah, for sure. And one thing I was kind of curious about, being that you're kind of in the gallery world and you're doing books, I know you shoot commercial work. I don't think you really put it on your website at all. I looked at it on your rep's website.
Yeah. That's where you see it.
Is like, do like galleries like frown upon like photographers doing commercial work, or like why not put it on your website? I was kind of curious. Like,
I think for me that like in my head, it's like there are two different worlds. And sometimes the work that you you do commercially, it's I mean the fact that somebody asks you to take a picture of something, it's already slightly compromised from who you are as an artist, because you wouldn't normally do it yourself. Mm-hmm. Now, but to be said, there's sometimes you get a job when it's very much can be like for me, like my rep, his name is Rob Magnotta, Edge Reps in New York City. And I met him when I have twins that are 17, turning 18 years old, like in about 3 weeks.
Wow.
And so 18 years ago, I was like one of those situations where like, holy shit, I'm having kids. I can't just like wait for the phone to ring if you have kids, and I was doing pretty well, but I was still really nervous about it, and every step of the way of my life, like, all those things you go through, like, I've met somebody, I'm going to move in together with that person. Like, I didn't want to do that until I could make sure I could afford it. Because I had this sweet gig and I was a building manager when I was in graduate school when I was 25, and I got to live and I lived for free, basically. So all I had to do was pay for my, my car and my food. So to give that up, I was like, oh man, this is really, I got to make sure I can feel this and feel comfortably financially to do that.
Yeah.
And then the same thing, getting a house. Okay. Having kids, it's like, you got to be ready financially and feel okay. Cause it's nerve wracking, all that shit, being a freelancer. Pressure. And no matter where unless you save money, it's nerve wracking, for 20 years, 30 years of nerve wracking. I've saved money, but like, my shirts are $19, and there's no brand on it. Which is, I got a lot of photo books, but I got a $19 shirt on.
Hey, man, it works.
It works perfectly. Yeah. But anyway, so we were getting to commercial work. So then I got an agent, and then our philosophy the whole time was show your artwork. Your artwork will be on his webpage, and then this is back before the internet was everywhere. We were still doing books, like portfolios, like those leather bound things I talked about making for John Goodman, and every picture in that was art, came from my artwork, and he always had stayed the course, like, we don't want to like dumb your not that it's not that it's dumb. You just want to stay pure with your work and your look, because you have something that's very unique, and people will hire you to do that and take pictures of their stuff, like their clothing, and then like some of the better jobs have turned out like where they just like somebody will let you just do your thing, and then one of those I did a campaign for Victoria Beckham.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
And that one, and that was just amazing. It was like we had the same kind of vision, and then after I started making a few pictures, she's like, Todd, you can do whatever you want, like literally, just these are gorgeous what you've already made, like just keep going, and she was just like, and like her staff was like, oh my God, she never says that to anybody, dude.
Mm-hmm.
And then, but I just kept doing my thing. And it was, we made a beautiful little book, and some really nice pictures. But then in other cases, like, you do something like, sometimes things don't fit, like people want you to, like they say they want you to do your thing, but they actually, like make it so different that like it's not your thing anymore.
Or then it's like mid-shoot, they're getting like, "Hey, Judy from accounting says we should shoot it like this."
Exactly. Yeah. And
while we're here, can we add on shot 12 through 17?
Exactly. Like whenever that happens, that's the one thing about an agent. I'm like, I don't know. Call my agent. He'll answer right away. And then he's like, "No, you can't add any shots." Because they do. They add shit up.
Yeah.
And it's so hard. And then these recession things, like you got like when you first go back out there, it's like you got to do whatever they want, man.
Yeah.
And just you do the 12 to 17 shots, and then you go slowly. It'll go back to like, no, call my agent. But like I'll be. It's funny. It was one of a fast company asked me to do a portrait the other day, and it was like, okay, this could be cool, and like. Mm-hmm. I haven't worked for a magazine like that in ages, but I like that magazine, but in terms of like the commercial work versus the artwork, I think that my agent, as you can see on his portfolio, on his website, mm-hmm. he has commercial projects I've done. And so that's where that lives. And then, so he takes care of that kind of promotional work. And then I just take care of my own personal website. Yeah. And it sort of served us right, and then if somebody wants to see something real specific, we'll just make a custom a link and send it to them. And often we will do that because sometimes there's always the marketing people that get scared.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, this is so dark. Mm-hmm. There was this one thing I did, like I shot this campaign. I'm not going to mention any names. Shot this campaign for this one company. It did very well. They said they sold lots of like, deodorant and stuff. And then the next time there was a one, and the people needed to smile in the pictures.
Yeah.
And then they were like, and I was a natural person to do it because I just done another job with them. And then some fucker in the PR department or marketing is like, there's nobody smiling in any of his photographs. Like, it's going to be awful, and it's just like, dude, like, but you don't get the chance to say, oh, of course we'll make them smile. Of course I can take a picture of somebody smiling.
Yeah, that's like the frustrating thing with the commercial stuff is because unless your stuff looks exactly like the comps, they're like,
right.
But it's like, I've been doing this for 25 fucking years, man.
Right, exactly. Yeah, of course we can make them smile. Of course I can make it lighter.
I'll get them to jump through flaming hoops.
Yeah, exactly. But it's and I think that the people that are untrained marketing people that don't really understand photography, they're the ones that throw the wrench in that. They're the ones that make those kind of things happen. But that's why it's great to have if you work with good editors and art directors,
yep.
and you can do repeat stuff with them. Like, I'm sure those kind of people where you're like, you have a second hand with them, like you shot with them a lot, and like they can just give you a few details and you'll come back with exactly what they wanted.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So those commissions, like you take something away from the commercial and editorial stuff too. It's enjoyable sometimes.
Absolutely. I always enjoy doing that because one of just like I work alone pretty much. I have an assistant that works with me every day at my studio, but other than that, like I pretty much work alone all the time, and all of my shooting is pretty much done alone, except recently I've had people go with me. But anyway, so whenever I got a chance to kind of get out of my studio, work with a crew of people, I've always kind of been into that, because it's fun, and then sometimes it's like a great thing. It's like, I'm really glad New York Times sent me to like Brazil last summer. Wow. To photograph like concrete architecture. Yep. And I'm so glad I got to go do that, because like it would be a long time that I would go until I get to go to Brazil again, and so sometimes those jobs will like set you in the right place, and you've got an amazing experience out of it, and you got a paycheck.
Yeah, for sure, man.
Yeah, but it doesn't always work that way. But sometimes you just get to go somewhere fun, and then you get a little tiny paycheck, Yeah, but still, I even do those because just to go do it,
Yeah.
Like I said, working class guy, I have a hard time just saying no, unless I'll get out of bed for like $1,000.
Yeah, pretty much, man. I don't think I've really turned down much. Only a couple of times when you can tell it's just going to be a nightmare. It's that, but you can kind of read it beforehand. But
yeah, it's true. You can sometimes tell. And then, but I generally, I was joking about getting out of bed for $1,000. Like, I'll do it for 500.
Okay.
Post COVID, I'll do it for 500. Okay.
Anytime anybody complains about money, I'm like, I just look back to like my first jobs working at a restaurant where you're making like $10, man. You're working 40 hours a week to make $400, and
right.
Shoot an editorial job for 2 hours for like $800. I'm like, this is great, man. It's all perspective.
It is perspective, and I have that long perspective.
Yeah.
I remember I had a job once. I cut onions for a sushi chef.
Wow.
In high school, and like all day I would cut onions. I couldn't get the smell off my hands.
Yeah.
And that job didn't last long, but I did it, for a while.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And
yeah.
I just wanted to touch on the portraiture stuff. I know we talked about it a little bit. You do some really cool portraits. It seems like primarily you mostly photograph women. What's kind of your approach to portraiture? Do you feel like there's like any similarities with like your landscape work, how you approach it, or what's kind of what is it you're looking for when you're doing portraiture, you think?
What I'm looking for is basically, I'm looking for the same thing I'm looking for when I'm like out scouting for houses or something. I'm looking a lot of the things that most of my work, not all of it, like recently it's a little bit different, but I'm looking for something that's familiar to me. I'm looking for something that's this looks like where I grew up, or I remember this kind of sky, or it's just something that I'm going back to my past in some way. Yep. And then a lot of times with portraiture, it's a similar kind of thing. There's something about there's a reason why when we walk down the street, like if you could photograph every person there, you wouldn't. There's only a handful of them you would.
Yeah.
And so you kind of like when you see somebody or find somebody that's kind of like fits your cast of characters, it's very much, and then it can work really well. And then when you find somebody that also is similar, is into similar things that you're into, it really can be great. Like there's a model I've worked with, named Christiana, for years, and for over 10 years we've been working together, and for her day job is fashion modeling, and so because of that, she says she finds a lot of it to be sort of just a little empty sometimes, like they're doing like beauty shots of lipstick and stuff like that, and she likes real life narrative, and she likes cinematic portraits, and so we work really well together in that way. And because I understand her and she understands me, it just kind of magic happens when we work together. Like I've never done a shoot with her and not gotten some like 10 great photographs out of one shoot.
She kind of brings something to it. Like she even has like an idea of like how she wants it to look. It sounds like.
Definitely. And we're both. It's funny because she's from Siberia and I'm from Ohio, and it's like, and somehow or another, something happened in our childhoods that like, set us askew on some weird path, and like we totally understand each other.
Yeah.
And it's quite interesting. So like, and when we're working, like, we'll, think about the wardrobe and all that stuff. But when we're actually taking pictures, we don't even really talk about it. I've never been like, okay, like, give me a somber mood or whatever.
Yeah.
Like I've never said that to anybody, but like, I tend to more like just not say anything sometimes and just sometimes there's tension when people are wondering, well, what should I do? And sometimes there's a great picture right in there, but yeah, so that's how the portraiture ends up kind of looking like, because I really like it's not, sometimes it's like it's very important what I take pictures of, but it's almost of equal importance of how I take those pictures, like what look am I going for, and how am I gonna print it, how am I gonna dodge and burn it, how am I gonna like modify the bring the mood down, stuff like that.
Yeah, it's all thing you said you print like a painter.
Yes. Yeah. I shoot like a documentarian, but I print like a painter. Yeah.
No, it's interesting. Yeah, because even like the settings where the locations where you're doing your portraiture, they look very similar to like when you're doing interiors, like even the book you did in Ohio.
Yeah, absolutely. And then sometimes that like whenever I find a room that's like a great room, I wish there was a person in it sometimes, and or like it's true, it's the same. It could be the same room just with no people. But yeah. So
like, yeah, and it seems like a lot of it, you mostly for portrait stuff, it's mostly women. And I was reading the comments as researching it, and it seemed like it was interesting to read people's different perspectives on it. Like some people love it, some people had some other stuff to say. Like they said, like there was like some nasty like comments in there and stuff. Like
I think there's always that kind of thing about like if you make work that's like very real and is very it just has like something, and there's something in there that is poignant. Sometimes things rub people the wrong way, and but I've had there, like for any comment like that, there's like hundreds that are not like that.
Yeah, definitely.
And so basically, and sometimes the people that like I said, the meaning of the image resides in the viewer.
Mm-hmm.
So when somebody brings like, something to the table and it's not really like, then they see it in a different way, then that just says a lot about who they might be or what they're grappling with in their own lives or what they've dealt with in the past, or, it's a touch point. It like, like art can like make people like see as something, and art absolutely triggers things.
Yep.
And that's why it works.
Yeah, it's like all their perception. Like they're creating the scenario in their mind of like whatever that picture was, but they weren't there when they took it. Like I always remember like I think it was probably like 10, 15 years ago now, Jill Greenberg had a whole series of like crying babies, and she took like a ton of backlash. Like people fucking hated it, but it was like that's just what kids do. It wasn't like they were like hurting these kids. They just it was just interesting to see people how they perceived it.
Yeah, I know. I know all about that work, and it's really quite interesting. And and you're right. A lot of people hated that.
Yep.
And then, but it's like, if you're a parent, you have kids that cry all fucking day sometimes, and and then you take away a lot. I think that and some of what she would do, she would have one of the parents take away a lollipop that they were just given, and the kid would burst out into tears, and then she'd take a few pictures and then give them the lollipop back.
Yeah.
And like, I wouldn't do that to somebody else's kid.
Yeah.
But but I think it's fine for a parent to do that to their own.
Yeah, definitely.
Or a piece of art. It's I think that I don't think there's any harm done in those pictures. No,
definitely not.
And then if somebody wants to get all up in arms, there's a hell of a lot of shit to get up in arms about. Other than that, out in the world. So like go look in some other area, and you'll find what you're hoping to correct.
Go look at the kids that are in cages down in like Texas.
Yeah, precisely.
That's the real problem.
That's the real fucking problem. I agree completely.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's maybe a good place to leave this. You know,
Yeah,
I want
definitely.
to say, I hope that every single person who hears this votes
Yep.
in November. And I also want to say, if you guys know people in these swing states, like, try to make sure they go vote, or they vote, and do not let these people take away our mail-in voter rights.
Nope.
So anyway,
Well, Todd,
power to you.
I appreciate it, man. I know this one went long, but it was a real pleasure talking to you, man. I really enjoyed.
Yeah. Very nice. Yeah, I can already tell you that, like, if you and Tiber I sat around a bar, we got really drunk.
Hey, well, let's make it happen someday, man.
It sounds like fun. And tell him I said hi when you talk to him.
I will, man. All right, Todd.
Okay.
Well, you take care, man.
Okay. All right. Take care. I'll see you later, man. All right. Bye, Alex.
Bye. So there you have it. That was the Todd Hido interview. I just want to thank Todd so much for taking the time to come on the podcast. It was a real pleasure talking to him about everything he's kind of done over the course of his career. Haven't really had too many like kind of fine art kind of gallery photographers on the podcast. So I was psyched to kind of hear about that world and how it operates and everything he kind of does with his books. Definitely go check out Todd's website at toddhido.com, as well as his Instagram at toddhido_, and definitely check out one of Todd's books. It's called House Hunting. Really amazing book as well. He's got a bunch of other ones that you can find online. Excerpts from Silver Meadows, which we talked about in the podcast. Really amazing series of photos. So definitely go check out some of those books. And as always, I'll be having weekly podcasts every Monday on iTunes, Spotify, as well as our YouTube page, The Photo Banter. So thanks so much for listening, and take care.